Welcome back to Bar Girl Baddies. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Today's story isn't about a bar girl or a romance gone wrong. It's about something that might hit even closer to home for a lot of you. It's about property fraud. It's about the dream of owning a piece of paradise and waking up to discover you own absolutely nothing. This is Michael Chen's story. 58 years old, from Mississauga, Ontario. Divorced. 2 grown kids. 30 years in IT consulting, building a modest retirement fund, one contract at a time. Michael did everything right. He saved his money, paid off his mortgage, raised his kids, and when he finally had enough saved up to retire somewhere warm, somewhere affordable, somewhere that wasn't another brutal Canadian winter, he thought he'd found it. A condo in Patong, Phuket. 2 bedrooms, partial sea view, walking distance to the beach, all for 90,000 Canadian dollars. He thought he'd bought his freedom. Instead, he bought a lie. And when the truth came out, he discovered that the Thai nationals whose names were on the company paperwork, the ones who were supposed to be just nominees, just names on paper, well, they claimed the property was legally theirs. Michael lost everything. More than 60% of his retirement savings, gone. And the people who scammed him, they're still out there, still running the same con on the next hopeful retiree. So if you've ever thought about buying property in Thailand, or if you know someone who has, stay with me, because this story could save you from making the same mistake Michael did. And if you've had a similar experience, drop it in the comments. Let's learn from each other. Because the next Michael Chen might be reading this right now, scrolling through property listings, dreaming of that ocean view. This is what Michael told us in his email. I'm not going to lie to you, I don't know exactly when the loneliness started. Maybe it was always there, just buried under the noise of daily life. Work deadlines, parent-teacher conferences, mortgage payments, the whole routine. But when my marriage ended in 2018, when I was 54, it was like someone turned off the noise machine and suddenly I could hear it. This hollow echo in my own house. My ex-wife got the place in Toronto. I moved to a rental in Mississauga, closer to my office. The kids were already grown, 26 and 23, living their own lives in Vancouver and Montreal. We'd talk on the phone once a month maybe. They were good kids, but they had their own problems, their own dreams. I wasn't part of those dreams anymore. I was just Dad, the guy who showed up for Christmas and sent e-transfers on birthdays. I'd spent 30 years building a career in IT consulting. Database management, system migrations, the kind of work that pays well but slowly turns your brain into oatmeal. By 2020, when COVID hit and everything went remote, I realised I'd been sitting in my apartment for 3 months and the only person I'd spoken to face to face was the guy who delivered my groceries. I was making good money. I had about 90,000 Canadian saved up in my RRSP, another 20,000 in a regular savings account. I owned my car outright, no debt except the credit card I paid off every month. On paper, I was doing fine. But I'd wake up at 2 in the morning, stare at the ceiling and think, is this it? Is this what I saved for? To sit alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in Mississauga, ordering DoorDash and watching Netflix until I die. The Canadian winters didn't help. I mean, I grew up with them, I should have been used to it. But something about being alone makes the cold feel colder. February 2021. It was -23 for a week straight. I hadn't left my apartment in 5 days. I was working from home, ordering everything online, and I realised I hadn't heard my own voice out loud in probably 48 hours. That's when I knew something had to change. I started watching YouTube at night. Travel videos mostly. Guys living in Southeast Asia, showing off their apartments, their monthly budgets, the street food, the beaches. There was this one channel, Canadian guy about my age, living in Chiang Mai. He did a video breaking down his cost of living. Rent, 400 Canadian a month for a 2-bedroom condo with a pool. Food, maybe 300. Utilities, nothing. Healthcare, pennies compared to what I was paying. His whole month cost less than my rent in Mississauga. And the thing that got me, the thing that really stuck in my head, he said this. He said, back in Canada, I was surviving. Here, I'm actually living. That hit me like a truck. I was surviving. I'd been surviving for years, just grinding through the days, waiting for retirement, waiting for something to start. But what if retirement wasn't some magic switch that made everything better? What if I retired in Mississauga and it was just more of the same, except now I didn't even have work to fill the hours. I started researching. Thailand came up again and again. Cheap cost of living, beautiful weather, friendly people, good food, and a huge expat community. Guys in their 50s and 60s, living like kings on retirement savings that wouldn't even cover rent in Toronto. I joined some Facebook groups, expats in Phuket, retire to Thailand, Chiang Mai digital nomads. The stories were all the same. Best decision I ever made. Why did I wait so long? You can't put a price on happiness. And then I started seeing the property posts. Guys showing off their condos, their villas, talking about how they'd bought them outright for 50, 60, 90,000 US dollars, places that would cost $1 million back home. I did the math. I had 90,000 Canadian saved. That was about 63,000 US at the time, or roughly 2 million Thai baht. That could buy me a condo, not rent. Buy, own. A place of my own in paradise. I started looking at listings. Phuket kept coming up. Patong, specifically. It was a beach town, tourist area, lots of expats, good infrastructure. The condos were modern, high-rise buildings with pools and gyms, partial ocean views, walking distance to the beach. Prices ranged from 60,000 to 200,000 US depending on size and location. For the first time in years, I felt something like excitement. Like maybe there was a way out of the hole I'd been sitting in. That's when I found Phuket Dream Homes. It was a Facebook ad, actually. Professional-looking website, photos of happy clients holding keys, testimonials in the comments, 5 stars across the board. I clicked through to their page and filled out a contact form. What's the harm in asking, right? A guy named Somchai responded within an hour. His English was perfect. He introduced himself as a senior property consultant, 15 years in the Phuket market, specializing in helping foreign retirees find their dream homes. He asked about my budget, my timeline, what I was looking for. I told him I had about 90,000 Canadian to spend. I wanted a 2-bedroom condo somewhere near the beach, something I could move into within a year. He sent back 3 listings that same day, all of them in Patong, all of them within my budget, and all of them looked incredible. Modern buildings, big balconies, shared pools, even gyms and saunas. One of them really caught my eye. 7th floor, 2 bedrooms, partial sea view, listed at 2.8 million baht, which was about 122,000 Canadian at the exchange rate. But Sonchai said, if I was serious, he could get it for me at 90,000 Canadian flat. A special deal for serious buyers. Cash sale, quick close. I told him I needed time to think. He said, of course, no pressure. But he had 2 other clients looking at the same unit. If I wanted it, I should move fast. We set up a Zoom call for the next week. That call was when things started to get complicated. Somchai was friendly, professional, walked me through the whole process. But then he got to the part about ownership. And this is where I should have asked more questions. This is where I should have walked away, he said. As I'm sure you know, Michael, foreigners can't own land in Thailand. But condos, you can own outright, as long as the building hasn't exceeded its foreign ownership quota. Every condo building in Thailand is allowed to sell up to 49% of its units to foreigners. The other 51% has to be owned by Thai nationals. I said, okay, so is this condo in the foreign quota? And he said, well, that's the thing. The building I showed you, it's a popular building, and the foreign quota is already full. But there's a legal structure we use, a workaround that's been used by thousands of expats. You register a Thai limited company. The company owns the condo. You own 49% of the company, and Thai nationals own the other 51%. On paper. But in reality, you control everything. The Thai shareholders are just nominees. They sign documents stating they have no claim to the property, no decision-making power. It's perfectly legal, perfectly safe. I asked him, if it's so safe, why doesn't everyone just buy condos in the foreign quota? He said, because there aren't enough to go around. Phuket is booming. Every foreigner wants a condo. The good ones sell out in days. If you limit yourself to the foreign quota, you'll be searching for months, maybe years, and you'll pay a premium. This way, you get exactly what you want at a fair price and you own it. I asked him, what if the Thai shareholders change their minds? What if they claim they actually own the property? He said, that's why we have the declaration documents. They sign a legal statement in front of a lawyer, swearing they hold the shares in nominee capacity only for your benefit. If they ever tried to claim ownership, you'd have that document. It's ironclad. I told him I needed to think about it. He said, absolutely, take your time. But again, he mentioned the other interested buyers. He said, if I wanted to see the property in person, he could arrange a viewing trip, fly out to Phuket, spend a week, look at the condo, meet the shareholders, review the paperwork with a lawyer, no commitment. Just come see for yourself. I should have said no. I should have said, let me find a condo in the foreign quota, even if it takes longer. But I was 56 years old, sitting in my apartment in Mississauga in the middle of January, looking out at a grey sky and a parking lot covered in slush, and I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe there was a loophole, a way to make it work. So I said yes. I booked a flight for February. The plane landed in Phuket at 11 at night. The second I stepped off the jetway, the heat hit me like a wall. It was 30 degrees Celsius, humid, sticky, and it felt like heaven. I'd been freezing for months. This was like stepping into a dream. Somjai picked me up at the airport. He was 45 maybe, Thai guy, slim build, dressed in a polo shirt and slacks, driving a newish Toyota sedan. He shook my hand, asked about my flight, made small talk. He seemed like a normal guy. A professional, not someone who was about to ruin my life. He drove me to a hotel in Patong, said we'd start the property tours the next day. I didn't sleep much that night, partly jet lag, partly excitement. I opened the hotel window and listened to the sounds of the street below, motorbikes, music from the bars, the distant crash of waves. I thought, I could live here. I could actually do this. The next morning, Somchai picked me up and we drove to the condo. It was a 10-minute drive from my hotel, a tall building with a cream-coloured facade, palm trees in the front, a big glass lobby. We rode the elevator to the 7th floor. Somchai unlocked the door and we stepped inside. It was beautiful. I'm not going to lie, it was exactly what I'd imagined. Open floor plan, tile floors, big windows with a view of the city and a sliver of ocean in the distance. The balcony had enough space for a table and chairs, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, modern kitchen. It even had furniture left behind by the previous owner. A couch, a bed, a dining table. Somchai said it was all included in the price. I stood on the balcony and looked out at the city, the palm trees, the flash of blue ocean between the buildings, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Like I'd finally found the place where I was supposed to be. Somchai let me take my time. He showed me the building amenities, the pool on the 2nd floor, the gym, the covered parking. He introduced me to the building manager, a Thai woman who spoke a little English. Everything felt real, legitimate. That afternoon, we went to a lawyer's office, small place, tucked between a tailor shop and a 7-Eleven, 2nd floor walk-up. The lawyer was an older Thai man, maybe 65, wire-rimmed glasses, neat desk stacked with files. He didn't speak much English, but Somchai translated. This is where I met the shareholders. 3 Thai nationals, 2 men, 1 woman. Somchai introduced them as his business partners. They smiled, shook my hand, didn't say much. They sat at the table and started signing documents. The lawyer pushed papers in front of them one by one. They signed, he stamped, moved to the next one. Somchai explained what was happening. They were signing the company registration documents, listing themselves as shareholders, 51% combined. And then they were signing the nominee declarations, individual statements, one for each shareholder, typed in Thai with an English translation attached. The declaration said, I acknowledge that I hold these shares in nominee capacity only, on behalf of Michael Chen, and I have no ownership interest in the property held by this company. I read the English translations. They seemed clear enough. Each shareholder signed their name, the lawyer stamped the documents with his official seal, and Somchai handed me the copies. He said, keep these safe. These are your protection. I asked the shareholders, through Somchai, do you understand what you're signing? They nodded, smiled, said yes, no problem. I asked, you won't try to claim the property later? They laughed, like it was a ridiculous question. No. We are just here to help. This is normal. And I believed them. I wanted to believe them. Because the alternative was admitting that my dream was impossible, that I'd flown halfway around the world for nothing. Somchai said, all that's left is the payment. Transfer 90,000 Canadian to the company account, and the property is yours. We'll finalize the registration at the land office next week. You can move in whenever you're ready. I went back to my hotel that night and stared at my laptop screen. The wire transfer form was open, $90,000, my entire retirement fund. I could click send, and in a few days, I'd own a condo in paradise. Or I could walk away, go home to Mississauga, keep renting, keep working, keep sitting alone in the cold. I clicked send. 2 days later, Somchai picked me up for dinner. Beachfront restaurant, tables in the sand, string lights overhead, waves crashing a few feet away. He ordered a bottle of wine, raised his glass, and said, "Congratulations, Michael. Welcome to your new life in paradise." I clinked my glass against his and smiled. I felt like I'd finally done something right. Like I'd taken control of my life. Like everything was about to get better. I was wrong. But I didn't know that yet. I didn't know that the documents in my bag were worthless, that the shareholders I'd just met would claim, a year later, that they were the real owners, that Somchai would disappear and I'd be left with nothing but a legal bill I couldn't afford, and a condo I'd never actually owned. I didn't know any of that, so I sat on that beach, drank that wine, and watched the sun set over the Andaman Sea, and for the first time in years, I felt happy. That's where I'll leave this part of the story. Michael Chen, 58 years old, sitting on a beach in Patong, believing he'd just bought his freedom. We'll get to what happened next in the second chapter. But for now, just sit with that image. Because that moment, that feeling of hope, of finally making it, that's what makes the fall so devastating. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and drop a comment. Let us know where you're watching from. And if you've ever thought about buying property in Thailand, keep watching. Because this story is far from over. Michael flew back to Canada in late February 2022. He had 3 months left on his apartment lease, a lifetime of accumulated stuff to sort through, and a head full of plans. He walked into his place in Mississauga, and it felt different. Smaller. Greyer. Like he was looking at someone else's life, someone he used to be. He spent March selling everything. Couch on Kijiji, bed on Facebook Marketplace, boxes of books to Value Village. His kids came by one weekend to pick through what they wanted. His daughter took some photo albums and his old record player. His son took the good TV and some kitchen stuff. They asked him if he was sure about Thailand, if he'd really thought it through. He said he had. He said he'd never been more sure of anything. They hugged him goodbye in the parking lot, and he watched them drive away and felt nothing. Not sadness, not regret. Just a kind of blank relief, like he was shedding a skin that didn't fit anymore. By May, he'd given notice at his last few clients, wrapped up his contracts, closed out his local bank accounts. He kept everything online, set up international transfers, got a Thai phone number through an app. Somchai helped him with the utilities setup at the condo, sent photos of the space, even helped him list it on Airbnb for short-term rentals while he was still in Canada. Make some money while you're getting ready to move, Somchai said. Cover the monthly fees. And it worked. The first booking came in June. A German couple, 10 days, 800 Canadian. Michael couldn't believe it. The condo was paying for itself. Somchai handled everything, arranged the key handoff through the building manager, sent Michael his cut after taking a 20% management fee. It wasn't much, but it felt like proof. Proof that this was real, that he'd made the right choice. He flew back to Phuket in early January 2023. This time, he had 2 suitcases and a one-way ticket. No more hotel. He was going home. To his place. His condo. The first few weeks were everything he'd dreamed about. He woke up to sunshine every single day. He'd make coffee, walk down to the pool, swim 20 laps before the heat got too intense. Then he'd shower, walk to a cafe for breakfast, sit outside and eat mango sticky rice or a Thai omelette, watch the omelette, wake up around him, motorbikes weaving through traffic, street vendors setting up their carts, the whole chaotic, beautiful rhythm of it. He met other expats at the bars along Beach Road, a British guy named Colin who'd been in Patong for 15 years, an Australian couple who ran a dive shop, a group of Scandinavians who met every Thursday for quiz night at an Irish pub. He started joining them. Started feeling like part of something, not lonely anymore, not invisible. He bought furniture for the condo, a better mattress, a desk, some plants for the balcony. He'd sit out there in the evenings with a beer, watch the sun drop behind the buildings, listen to the city hum below him, and think, I actually did it. I actually got out. But small things started to shift. Little cracks in the perfect picture. Somchai stopped responding to messages as quickly. Michael would text him about a maintenance issue or a question about the building fees, and instead of getting a reply in an hour, it would take 2 days. Then 3. When Somchai did respond, it was always brief. Busy with other clients. We'll get back to you. Everything is fine. Michael told himself it was normal. Somchai had other people to deal with, other properties. He wasn't going to hold Michael's hand forever. But it nagged at him. A small uncomfortable feeling in his gut that he tried to ignore. Then April happened. Michael was at an expat meetup at a beachfront bar, one of those weekly things where 30 or 40 foreigners would gather to drink cheap beer and complain about visa runs. He got talking to another Canadian, a guy named Dave from Vancouver, 62, grey ponytail, wearing a faded Canucks t-shirt. They bonded over hockey, over the Maple Leafs, choking in the playoffs again, over how weird it was to watch games at 3 in the morning because of the time difference. Dave had been in Phuket for 4 years. He bought a villa in Chalong through a company structure, same setup as Michael, Thai shareholders, nominee declarations, the whole thing. And for 3 years, everything had been fine. But now, he said, everything was falling apart. Michael asked what happened. Dave leaned in, lowered his voice like he didn't want the other expats to hear. He said, "You been following the news? The crackdown?" Michael hadn't. Dave pulled out his phone, showed him articles from Thai news sites. The government had announced a major enforcement campaign against nominee shareholder structures. Hundreds of businesses across Phuket, Pattaya, Samui, all being investigated, foreigners getting raided, companies getting dissolved, properties being seized. The articles talked about violations of the Foreign Business Act, illegal use of Thai nationals as fronts for foreign ownership. They quoted government officials saying the crackdown would continue until every illegal nominee structure was rooted out. Dave said, "My Thai shareholders are now saying they're the real owners. They're claiming I never paid them for the shares, that they own the company and the villa belongs to them. My lawyer says I'm fucked. The nominee declarations don't mean anything in Thai law. Using nominees is illegal. So the courts won't protect me." Michael felt his stomach drop. He said, "But you have documents, right? Signed statements." Dave laughed. It was a bitter sound. He said, "Yeah, I have documents. You know what my lawyer told me? He said those declarations are evidence of the crime, not protection from it. They prove I set up an illegal nominee structure. If this goes to court, I might lose everything and face criminal charges." Michael tried to keep his voice steady. He said, "That won't happen to me. My situation is different. My agent set everything up properly." Dave looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "What's your agent's name?" Michael said. "Somchai, Phuket Dream Homes." Dave's face changed. He said, "Jesus Christ." "You used Somchai," Michael said. "Yeah, why?" Dave said, "Mate, I hate to tell you this, but I know 3 other guys who got scammed by him. Same setup. Company structure, nominee shareholders. Everything looks legal until it doesn't. 2 of them already lost their properties. The 3rd one's in court right now, throwing good money after bad on lawyer fees." Michael felt the ground shift under him. He said, "You're lying." Dave said, "I wish I was. Look, I don't know your situation. Maybe yours is different. But if I were you, I'd get a second opinion from a real lawyer, not the guy Somchai introduced you to. An independent lawyer who doesn't have skin in the game." Michael left the bar early, walked back to his condo in a daze. The streets that had felt magical a week ago now felt alien, threatening. He got home, locked the door, sat on his couch, and tried to call Somchai, straight to voicemail. He sent 3 texts, no response. He didn't sleep that night, just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through everything in his head. The documents he'd signed, the shareholders he'd met once for 30 minutes in a lawyer's office, the declarations that were supposed to protect him. He tried to remember exactly what they said, but he realized he'd only read the English translations. He didn't actually know what the Thai version said. He didn't speak Thai. He'd trusted Somchai. He'd trusted everyone. Over the next 3 days, Somchai didn't respond to any of Michael's messages. Finally, a week later, a text came through. "Sorry, been very busy. Everything is fine with your property, Don't listen to rumors. Your documents are solid. Michael wrote back immediately. I want to meet. I have questions. The reply took 6 hours. Not necessary. Everything is legal. You are worrying for nothing, Michael wrote. I'm hiring a lawyer to review my documents. No response. He found a law firm through an expat forum, a place that had good reviews from foreigners who'd had actual legal problems, not just property purchases. He made an appointment for the following week. A woman named Apinya, early 40s, spoke perfect English, office in Phuket town, away from the tourist areas. He brought all his documents. The company registration, the shareholder agreements, the nominee declarations, the receipt for his 90,000 Canadian. Apinya spread everything out on her desk. She read through it all, slowly, making notes. Michael sat across from her and watched her face. Looking for reassurance. Looking for anything that would tell him this was going to be okay. She looked up after 20 minutes. She said, Mr. Chen, I need to be very direct with you. These documents are worthless. Michael felt like he'd been punched. He said, What do you mean worthless? She said, The nominee declarations have no legal standing in Thailand. Using Thai nationals as nominee shareholders to circumvent foreign ownership restrictions is illegal under the Foreign Business Act. If the authorities investigate your company, it will be dissolved. And if your Thai shareholders decide to claim actual ownership, which they are legally entitled to do, these declarations won't protect you. Michael said, But they signed. They said they had no ownership interest. Apinya said, It doesn't matter what they signed. Thai law says they own 51% of the company. The company owns the condo. Therefore, they control the property. A private agreement saying otherwise is unenforceable because the entire structure is illegal. Michael said, So what can I do? Apinya said, You can try to negotiate with the shareholders, pay them to sign over their shares, though that would require restructuring the company and there's no guarantee it would work. Or you can try to sell your 49% stake, though who would buy it? Or you can hope that nothing happens, that the shareholders never turn on you and the government never investigates. But Mr. Chen, I have to tell you, the government is cracking down hard right now. The land department can force the sale of this property at any time. You would have 1 year to sell it yourself. If you don't, they'll sell it for you and keep 5% of the proceeds. Michael felt the room tilt. He said, I paid 90,000 Canadian dollars for this place. Apinya's face softened. She said, I know. I'm very sorry. This is a common scam. The agents who set these up, they either don't understand Thai law or they don't care. They get their commission and move on. When things fall apart, they disappear. Michael spent the whole ride back to Patong trying to breathe normally. His hands were shaking. He kept thinking, this can't be happening. This can't be real. He got back to his condo and it didn't feel like his anymore. He looked around at the furniture he'd bought, the plants on the balcony, the framed photos he'd hung on the wall, and realized none of it mattered. He didn't own this place. He'd never owned it. He called Sonchai. This time, he didn't leave a voicemail. He called 8 times in a row. On the 9th call, Sonchai picked up. Michael said, I just met with a lawyer. She said my documents are worthless. She said this whole structure is illegal. Sonchai sighed. He said, Michael, these lawyers, they always say that. They want you to hire them for expensive services. Your structure is fine. It's been used for years, Michael said. She said the government is cracking down. She said I could lose everything. Sonchai said, that's not going to happen. I have hundreds of clients with the same setup. No one has had problems. Michael said, I met a guy at a bar who said 3 people got scammed by you. He said 2 of them already lost their properties. There was a pause. Then Sonchai said, I don't know what you're talking about. People like to spread rumors. You need to trust the process. Michael said, I want to meet the shareholders. I want to talk to them directly. Sonchai said, that's not necessary. Michael said, I'm paying you to set this up. I want to meet them. Sonchai said, I'll see what I can arrange. That was the last time Michael spoke to him. Over the next 2 weeks, Michael sent 20 messages. Called 15 times. Every call went to voicemail. Every text went unanswered. By mid-July, the number was disconnected entirely. Michael went to Sonchai's office, the address listed on the Phuket Dream Homes website. It was a small storefront in a strip mall. Glass door with the company logo on it. Locked. Dark inside. He asked the shop next door, a woman selling tourist t-shirts, if she knew where Somchai was. She shrugged. Said she hadn't seen him in weeks. Said people came by looking for him all the time. That night, Michael went deep into the internet. He found forums he'd never looked at before. Phuket property scams, Thailand real estate warnings. And there it was. Thread after thread about Phuket dream homes. About Somchai. Dozens of people telling the same story Michael was living. Bought a condo through a company structure. Paid cash. Everything was fine for a while. Then the shareholders claimed ownership, or the government investigated, or the agent disappeared, and the money was gone. One post from a British guy said, "I lost £120,000. The shareholders are living in my villa now. My lawyer says I have no legal recourse because the whole thing was illegal from the start. Somchai is long gone. No one knows where he is. Don't make the same mistake I did." Michael read until 3 in the morning. Every story was a variation of his own. Some people lost more money. Some lost less. But they all lost. And none of them got it back. He finally fell asleep on his couch as the sun was coming up, and when he woke up it was early afternoon, and his phone was buzzing with a notification. An email. From the building management company. Formal notice of a registered letter waiting for him at the front desk. He needed to come sign for it. He went downstairs in his shorts and a t-shirt, unshowered, still half asleep. The building manager handed him a large envelope, thick paper, official-looking stamps. He signed the receipt and went back upstairs. He opened the envelope on his kitchen counter. The letter was in Thai. He used Google Translate on his phone, scanning each paragraph, watching the English words appear on his screen. It took him 3 read-throughs to understand what he was looking at. It was from one of the shareholders. The younger of the 2 men, the one who'd smiled at him in the lawyer's office 16 months ago. The letter said that Michael had failed to pay for the shares he claimed to own in the company, that the shareholder, as the majority stakeholder with 51%, was the legal owner of the company and therefore the legal owner of the property, that Michael was occupying the condo without permission, that he needed to vacate within 30 days or pay rent retroactively for the time he'd been living there. The amount listed was 12,000 Canadian dollars. Michael read it again. And again. His brain wouldn't process it. This couldn't be real. He paid $90,000. He had the receipt. He had the wire transfer confirmation. He had everything. He called Apinya, the lawyer. She said she could meet him the next day. He barely slept again that night. The meeting was worse than he expected. Apinya read the letter, translated the parts Google had gotten wrong, and laid out Michael's options. None of them were good. She said, "This shareholder is claiming you never paid for your shares." "Do you have proof of payment?" Michael said. "I wired 90,000 Canadian to the company account." She said, "Do you have documentation showing that payment was specifically for shares in the company?" Michael realized he didn't. The wire transfer just said property purchase. It didn't specify shares. It didn't specify anything. Apinya said, "The shareholder is arguing that he owns 51% of the company, which gives him control. And he's arguing that you owe rent because you've been living in a property he controls without his permission. Legally, he has a case. You could fight it, but you'd be fighting from a very weak position because the entire company structure is illegal to begin with," Michael said. "What if I pay him? What if I give him what he's asking?" Apinya said. "What's to stop him from asking for more next month? Or what's to stop the other 2 shareholders from making the same claim?" Michael put his head in his hands. He said, "What do I do?" Apinya said, "You could try to negotiate a settlement, offer to buy out his shares. But Mr. Chen, I have to be honest. I've seen this before. These people know you're trapped. They know you can't go to the police because the structure is illegal. They'll bleed you dry if you let them." Michael set up a meeting with the shareholder. Neutral location. A restaurant near Patong Beach midday. He brought Apinya with him. The shareholder showed up with a friend, another Thai man who didn't introduce himself, just sat there and stared at Michael the whole time. The shareholder's name was Niran. He was 32, skinny, wearing a knockoff Rolex and a gold chain. He spoke decent English, better than he'd let on in the lawyer's office that day. He said, "You owe me money." Michael said, "I paid 90,000 Canadian for that condo." Niran said, You paid Somchai, not me. I never got my share. So now, I want what I'm owed, Michael said. Somchai set this up. He was supposed to pay you. Niran shrugged. He said, not my problem. I own 51% of the company. The company owns the condo. The condo is mine. Apinya stepped in. She asked, in Thai, what Niran wanted to make this go away. He answered in Thai. She translated for Michael. He wants 50,000 Canadian dollars to sign over his shares. Michael felt sick. He said, I don't have $50,000. Niran said, then you have a problem. Michael said, even if I pay you, what about the other two shareholders? Niran smiled. He said, they'll want money too. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. Michael walked back to his condo in a fog. $50,000. He didn't have it. His savings were nearly gone. He'd spent everything on this place, on moving here, on setting up his life. He had maybe 15,000 left. If he paid Niran, he'd have nothing. And Niran was right. The other two shareholders would come after him next. He could pay and pay and pay and still end up with nothing. He sat on his balcony that night and looked out at the city, at the ocean in the distance, at the life he thought he built, and he understood, finally, completely, that it was over. He'd lost. The dream was dead. And there was no way back. He'd gambled his entire retirement fund on a lie, and the people who'd sold him that lie were gone. Unreachable. Untouchable. Living their lives somewhere else while his fell apart. That's the thing about scams. They don't just take your money. They take your hope, your trust, your belief that the world is a place where things can work out if you try hard enough. Michael had tried. He'd researched, asked questions, reviewed documents, done everything he thought was right, and he'd still lost. Because the game was rigged from the start. And he never even knew he was playing. Michael hired Apinya on a retainer, 15,000 Canadian dollars, which was almost everything he had left. She said she'd do what she could, but she warned him up front that the case was weak. The company structure was illegal. The nominee declarations were unenforceable. The best outcome would be a settlement where Michael didn't lose everything. The worst outcome was criminal prosecution for violating the Foreign Business Act. She filed a response to Niran's claim, arguing that Michael had paid in good faith for the property, that Somchai had acted as the company's representative, that the funds had gone into the company account. She requested documentation from Niran showing he'd never received his share of the payment. She demanded proof of his ownership stake. She bought Michael time. But that's all it was, time. September bled into October. Every document needed translation. Every hearing got postponed because the court was backlogged, or because Niran's lawyer filed a continuance, or because some procedural requirement hadn't been met. Michael would show up to the courthouse in Phuket town, sit on a hard wooden bench outside the courtroom, wait for 3 hours, only to be told the hearing was rescheduled the next month. He tried to find Somchai. He hired a private investigator, a Thai guy recommended by another expat. Cost him 2,000 Canadian. The investigator came back 2 weeks later with almost nothing. Somchai had multiple aliases, bank accounts in different names. The business registration for Phuket Dream Homes was tied to a PO box that didn't exist anymore. His phone numbers were all disconnected. He'd either left Thailand entirely, or he was laying low somewhere up north, maybe Chiang Mai or Chiang Rai, waiting for the heat to die down. The investigator said, "This guy's done this before. Probably doing it right now with a different name. He sets up the scam, runs it for a few years, disappears when people start catching on, then pops up somewhere else and does it again. You're not going to find him. And even if you did, getting your money back would be nearly impossible." Michael filed a police report anyway. Fraud, theft, operating an illegal business. The officer who took his statement was polite but disinterested. He said they'd investigate. Michael never heard from them again. He went back to the station twice, asked for updates. The first time, they said the case was being reviewed. The second time, they couldn't even find the file. He found a Facebook group for Somchai's victims. 38 members. People from Australia, the UK, Canada, the US, Germany, even one guy from South Africa. They'd all used Phuket Dream Homes. They'd all lost money. Amounts ranged from 50,000 to 200,000 Canadian. Total damages, estimated, over 4 million Canadian dollars. And Somchai had vanished. Some of the victims had tried to band together, hire a lawyer as a group, file a class action. It went nowhere. Thai law didn't make class actions easy, and the underlying problem was that they'd all participated in illegal nominee structures. Their lawyers kept telling them the same thing Apinya had told Michael. You can't ask the court to enforce an illegal contract. One woman from Brisbane posted in the group, I lost 110,000 Australian dollars. My Thai shareholders sold the condo out from under me, pocketed the money, and there's nothing I can do about it. The lawyer I hired took another 20,000 and basically told me I was screwed. I'm back in Australia now, living with my sister, working part-time at Woolworths at 63 years old because I don't have enough to retire anymore. Don't let anyone tell you this can't happen. It happened to me. Michael read her post 3 times. He saw his own future in it. Broke, humiliated, starting over at an age when he should have been winding down. By November, the other 2 shareholders had joined Niran's lawsuit. They filed a joint claim to dissolve the company and force the sale of the condo. They argued that the company was a shell, that it had never conducted legitimate business, that it existed solely to circumvent foreign ownership laws. They argued that Michael's 49% stake was fraudulent, that he'd manipulated them into signing documents they didn't understand. Apinya said, they're claiming they were victims of Somchai too. They're saying he tricked them into being nominees, that they never knew what they were signing. It's probably not true, but it doesn't matter. The court might believe them. And even if the court doesn't, the company is still illegal. The outcome is the same either way. Michael asked what would happen if the company was dissolved. Apinya said the assets would be liquidated, the condo would be sold. Michael, as a 49% shareholder, would be entitled to 49% of the proceeds, minus legal fees, taxes, and administrative costs. She estimated he might walk away with 25 to 30,000 Canadian if he was lucky. Michael said, I paid 90,000. Apinya said, I know. December was the worst month of Michael's life. He couldn't sleep. He barely ate. He'd wake up at 4 in the morning, heart pounding, and just lie there staring at the ceiling, running through everything in his head. Every decision, every moment where he could have walked away and didn't. He'd replay the Zoom call with Somchai, the conversation where Somchai had explained the company structure. He'd think, why didn't I just say no? Why didn't I insist on a condo in the foreign quota? Why did I trust him? He started drinking more. Not a lot, not enough that anyone noticed, but enough that he needed it to get through the day. A beer at lunch, 2 beers in the afternoon, 3 or 4 at night, sitting on his balcony, watching the city lights blur together. He stopped going to the expat meetups, stopped answering messages from the friends he'd made. Colin, the British guy, texted him a few times asking if he was okay. Michael didn't respond. He didn't want to explain. Didn't want to see the pity in their faces when they found out what had happened. On New Year's Eve, he sat alone in his condo and watched fireworks over Patong beach from his balcony. The whole city was celebrating. Music, laughter, crowds of tourists in the streets below. And Michael sat there with a bottle of beer, thinking, this time last year, I thought I'd made it. I thought I'd escaped. I thought my life was finally starting, now it was ending. And he had no idea what came next. The court hearing in January was supposed to be the big one. The judge would review the evidence, hear arguments from both sides, make a preliminary ruling. Michael sat in the courtroom with Apinya, watching the Thai legal proceedings that he couldn't understand, relying on her whispered translations to know what was happening. Niran's lawyer argued that the company was fraudulent, that Michael had coerced Thai nationals into participating in an illegal scheme, that the property should be returned to Thai ownership immediately. Apinya argued that Michael had acted in good faith, that he'd been defrauded by Somchai, that he deserved to recoup at least part of his investment. The judge asked questions, looked at documents, made notes. At the end of 2 hours, he said he'd issue a ruling within 60 days. Michael left the courthouse feeling numb. Apinya said she thought it had gone as well as could be expected, but her face said otherwise. The ruling came in March. The judge sided with the shareholders. The company was declared a nominee structure in violation of the Foreign Business Act. The company was ordered dissolved. The condo was to be sold within 6 months. Proceeds would be distributed according to shareholding percentages after all fees and taxes. Apinya called Michael with the news. She said, I'm sorry, we can appeal, but I don't think it'll change anything. Michael said, how much will I get? She said, I'll need to calculate it exactly, but probably around 25,000 Canadian. Maybe 30 if we're lucky with the sale price. Michael hung up and sat on his couch and cried for the first time since his divorce. Big, ugly, choking sobs. He cried for the money, for the dream, for the idiot he'd been sitting on that beach 16 months ago, drinking wine with Somchai, thinking he'd finally won. Niran's lawyer reached out a week later with a settlement offer. Michael could sign over his 49% stake immediately in exchange for 800,000 baht, about 35,000 Canadian at the current exchange rate. He'd avoid further legal fees, avoid the uncertainty of a sale, avoid dragging this out for another 6 months. Michael asked Apinya what she thought. She said, "Take it. It's more than you'll probably get if you wait, and it's over. You can move on." Michael said, "Move on to what?" She didn't have an answer for that. He signed the papers in early April. Same lawyer's office where he'd met the shareholders the first time, almost 2 years ago. Different room, same building. The shareholders weren't there this time. Just their lawyer, Apinya, and Michael. He signed his name on 6 different documents. The lawyer handed him a bank draft for 800,000 baht. They shook hands. It was over in 15 minutes. Michael walked out into the Phuket heat and got into Apinya's car, and she drove him back to Patong. She said, "I'm sorry this happened to you." He said, "Yeah, me too." She dropped him off at the condo. He had 30 days to move out. He spent the first week in a fog, barely leaving the apartment. Then he started packing. Not that he had much. Some clothes, a laptop, a few books. Everything else, the furniture, the plants, the framed photos, he left behind. Let the shareholders deal with it. Let them have it all. He found a cheap guest house near the bus station, paid for a month up front, 600 baht a night, 14 Canadian dollars. Concrete room, saggy bed, shared bathroom down the hall. It was the kind of place he would have never considered staying 16 months ago. Now it was all he could afford. He sat in that room and did the math. 35,000 Canadian dollars. That was what he had left from his 90,000. He'd lost 55,000 Canadian, plus another 15 on legal fees. 70,000 total. Gone. At 58 years old, with 35,000 in the bank, he couldn't retire anywhere. Not in Canada, not in Thailand, not anywhere. He had to go back to work, had to start over. He booked a flight back to Toronto for late May. One way, he didn't have a place to live, didn't have a job lined up, didn't have anything except a suitcase and a bank account that was a third of what it used to be. He thought about staying in Thailand, finding cheap rent somewhere up country, scraping by on what he had left. But he couldn't. Every street in Phuket reminded him of what he'd lost. Every expat he ran into asked him how retirement was going. He couldn't tell that story anymore, couldn't smile and pretend everything was fine. So he went home. Back to Mississauga, back to the cold. His ex-wife's new husband had a rental property, a basement apartment in a house near the Geo station. They gave Michael a deal. 1,300 a month, utilities included. He moved in June 1st. Basement windows, low ceilings, furnace in the corner that kicked on every 20 minutes with a rattling bang. It was depressing as hell. But it was what he could afford. He started applying for IT contracts. The market had changed since he'd left. Everyone wanted younger guys, people who knew the new frameworks, the new languages. He was 58, out of the game for 2 years, and his resume had a gap he couldn't explain without telling the whole humiliating story. He finally found work in August. Contract position, database migration for a mid-sized logistics company. 6 months, maybe extended to a year if the project went well. $45 an hour, which was decent but not great. He'd been making 70 before he left. But he took it. He didn't have a choice. He worked from his basement apartment. Same routine as before. Except now it was worse, because he knew what he'd lost. He'd had paradise. He'd had sunshine and ocean views, and a life that felt like living instead of just surviving. And he'd thrown it away because he trusted the wrong person. The thing that ate at him most wasn't even the money. It was the stupidity. He'd thought he was being careful. He'd researched, asked questions, reviewed documents, met with lawyers, and he'd still gotten scammed. How? How had he not seen it? He went over it 1,000 times in his head, the red flags he'd missed, the questions he should have asked, the lawyer who'd barely spoken English and just stamped documents without explaining anything, the shareholders he'd met once and never spoken to again, the company structure that Somchai had pushed on him. instead of finding a condo in the foreign quota. Every single warning sign had been there. And he'd ignored all of them because he'd wanted to believe, because the alternative was admitting that his dream was out of reach, that he didn't have enough money to buy what he wanted, that he needed to compromise, to settle for less, to accept reality instead of chasing fantasy. That's what killed him. Not that he'd been scammed, but that he'd scammed himself. He'd been so desperate to escape his life in Canada that he'd convinced himself the obvious lie was actually truth. If he could go back, what would he do differently? He thought about that a lot. He would have insisted on a condo in the foreign quota, even if it meant waiting months to find one, even if it cost more. Or he would have leased long-term instead of buying. 30 years was a long time. At his age, a 30-year lease would have been plenty. And it would have been legal. Legitimate. No shareholders, no company structures, no lies. Or maybe he wouldn't have gone to Thailand at all. Maybe he would have taken that 90,000 and invested it properly, kept working another 5 years, retired at 63 with 150,000 instead of 35, stayed in Canada, accepted his life instead of running from it. But he couldn't go back. He could only sit in his basement apartment in Mississauga, staring at his laptop screen, writing code for a company he didn't care about, trying to rebuild the retirement fund he'd already lost once. The loneliness was worse now than it had been before Thailand. At least before, he'd had hope. He'd had something to work toward. Now he just had regret. And the knowledge that he'd wasted 2 years and $70,000 on a dream that was never real. He joined an online support group for people who'd been scammed in Thailand property deals. There were hundreds of them. People who'd lost more than him, people who'd lost less. All of them telling the same story with minor variations. Trusted the wrong agent, signed the wrong documents, believed the wrong promises, lost everything. Some of them were angry, ranting about corrupt Thai officials, about lawyers who were in on the scam, about a system designed to rob foreigners. Some of them were broken, talking about suicide, about giving up, about how they'd never recover. And some of them, like Michael, were just tired of being angry, tired of grieving, tired of replaying the same mistakes over and over. Michael posted his story in the group once, just laid it all out, the whole thing, start to finish. A dozen people responded, saying they'd been scammed by Somchai too. Phuket Dream Homes had taken millions from foreigners, and no one had ever faced consequences for it. Somchai was still out there somewhere, probably running the same scam under a different name. One guy wrote, "The worst part isn't losing the money. It's knowing the people who took it from you are living their best lives while you're eating ramen in a shitty apartment, trying to figure out how to retire on nothing. That's what kills you, the injustice of it." Michael read that and thought, yeah, that's exactly it. He turned 59 in November. His kids sent him texts. His daughter called, talked for 10 minutes about her job, her boyfriend, asked how he was doing. He said fine. She said she was glad he was back in Canada, that the Thailand thing had worried her. He said, yeah, it was time to come home. He didn't tell her why. Didn't tell her he'd lost everything. Just let her think he'd gotten homesick. He sat alone in his apartment that night with a grocery store cupcake and a single candle and thought, this is 59. This is what I built. A basement apartment, a contract job, and $35,000 to my name. But he was alive. He was working. He had a roof over his head and food in his fridge. It wasn't the life he'd wanted, but it was a life. And maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be. He still thought about Thailand sometimes. Not the condo or the money or the scam, just the feeling of those first few weeks. Waking up to sunshine, swimming in the pool, sitting on the balcony with a beer, watching the city below, feeling like he'd finally made it. That feeling was real, even if everything else was a lie. And sometimes, late at night, he'd close his eyes and go back there. Just for a minute. Just long enough to remember what hope felt like before it turned to ash. That's Michael's story. 59 years old, working from a basement apartment in Mississauga, trying to rebuild a retirement he already lost once. He won't get his money back. Somchai will never face justice. The shareholders who took his condo are probably living in it right now, or they sold it and split the profit. And Michael is here, alone, starting over. There's no Hollywood ending, no redemption arc. Just a slow, grinding work of surviving. Of getting up every day, and doing it again. Of accepting that sometimes you lose, and the people who made you lose never pay for it, and life goes on anyway. But maybe there's a lesson in that. Maybe the lesson is this. If you're thinking about buying property in Thailand, or anywhere else where the laws are complicated and you don't speak the language, educate yourself first. Not through agents who have commissions to earn, not through YouTube videos from guys trying to sell you a lifestyle, to actual lawyers who don't have skin in the game, through government websites, through the law itself. If you can't afford a condo within the foreign quota, don't buy lie. Long term. Or save up more money until you can afford the real thing. Don't let anyone talk you into a company structure, or a nominee scheme, or any legal workaround that sounds too good to be true. Because it is too good to be true. And when it falls apart, you're the one who pays. Michael wasn't stupid. He was hopeful. And hope, when you're lonely and desperate and looking for a way out, can make you believe things you shouldn't, can make you ignore warning signs that should have been obvious, can make you gamble your entire future on a promise from a stranger. He lost that gamble, and now he's paying for it. Every single day. If his story stops even one person from making the same mistake, maybe it was worth telling. Maybe that's the only good thing that can come from this. A warning. A cautionary tale. A reminder that paradise isn't something you can buy. Not for $90,000. Not for any amount. Michael learned that the hard way. Don't make the same mistake he did. Thanks for watching Bar Girl Baddies. If this story resonated with you, or if you've had a similar experience, drop it in the comments below. Let's look out for each other. Because scams like this are still happening right now, today, to someone who thinks they're being careful, someone who thinks it can't happen to them. It can. It did. And it might again. Stay safe out there.